Hi everyone, welcome to CodeKamikaze YouTube channel. So today we are going to discuss about writing the Docker file with some best practices. In the last couple of videos, in this DevSecOps series, we have discussed about SaaS, we have discussed about ACA, and we have discussed about other scanning tools for making sure our environment, which means our source code, sanitized with the vulnerabilities and security flaws. So, when discussing about, writing the container runtime files, or you can say Docker files, so why do we need to write with the best practices? So, what all challenges are going to come? So, what all issues are going to come if you don't write the container runtime, or Docker files with the best practices? So, those all information we'll discuss in this video. So, stay tuned until this video get complete. So, writing a Docker file with a security and vulnerability avoidance is crucial for several reasons. There are hundreds of reasons are available. So, first one is security hardening and compliance and test and reduce the exploitability and optimize the performance, especially while it is running, and reputation and production. So these all different crucials for several reasons to write your Docker file with some best practices. So you can ask me question, hey, why do we need to use Docker itself? There are hundreds of container runtimes are available. Yeah, that's up to you. You can use different container runtimes. In the market, we have the Docker, we have the Containerd, and we have Creo, and Rocket, Podman, and etc. So you can use any container runtime to make your application, microservice to be get deployed or to be containerized your application. So writing the Docker file, who is responsible? So the responsibility of writing the Docker file is the both like DevOps or DevSecOps and the developer. Because whatever stack you're using, whatever stack, irrespective of Python, irrespective of Java, .NET, Ruby, and other technologies, you can use a container runtime to make your application containerized, which means you can create a file, copying all components and create an image and get deployed into as a container into your container runtime. So that is why we have a bunch of tools are available. As for the requirement, you can choose any one of the container runtime to make your application containerized. So, let's discuss about what all best practices we need to follow while writing the Docker file. So, in this video, I'm going to take Docker as a container runtime, and I think in a current real world, you may use a different container runtime. But yeah, so these best practices applies on every container runtime tools, irrespective of Docker, Containerd, Creo, Rocket, Podman, and other tools. So, I'm diving into the concept. So, let me open the PDF that I have created. So in this video, we are going to discussing about creating a Docker file with the security in mind, especially, and it's crucial to ensure the safety of your containerized application. So we have some best practices are mentioned in this PDF. So since we are writing the Docker file, already you have sliced your monolithic to microservices. So each microservice has to be deployed as a container. So you need to write a base Docker file to create a Docker image. By writing Docker file, we should follow some best practices. So usually, while writing a Docker file, so the first best practice is like use official base image. So as reading the description, so start your Docker file with official base images from the trusted sources like Docker Hub and official images, which means once you are creating a official base image, so usually these base images are do available on image registries such as we have a Docker Hub, we have a Harbor, and we have other image registries. But yeah, as for the best practices, trust the source. Like what is a source, you can pull it from Docker Hub, and especially official images. So when it comes to official images, usually you can in Java application you can use a OpenJDK, and in Python application you can use a Python. So, and if you want to deploy any Nginx application, you can use Nginx. So and let's take example of Ubuntu. So while you are putting your base image as a official Ubuntu, so you need to see is it official or not. So you can go to hub.docker.com, so you can find whether this image as a tag as official or not, because there are hundreds of customized images are available in the Docker Hub or other image registries, because everybody keeping their own images after customization as per the requirement. So you need to look whether this official, this base images are relaying into the trusted source, or is it official images or not. So you can check into the tags, so what all versions it has tags, and when it got released. That's the main reason, you need to use official base images to follow the best practices. And the second one, keep image minimal, which means like only include necessary dependencies and libraries in your Docker image. This is reduce the attack source and minimize the potential for vulnerabilities. That's true. Like keeping image minimal, which means you can keep the minimal dependencies which are more necessary to build your application. Other than this, usually developers, or maybe it's not developers, like if you are building your application and you are containerized application, for that while you're writing your Docker file, so you are unnecessarily no need to use any libraries or dependencies into Docker image, because it's going to heavy of your image, and even if it is unused, so attacker can take advantage and it can be a security flaw. So that's the reason, so we need to follow the keep image minimal as a best practices while writing the Docker file. And the third one, update regularly, which means regularly update your base images and dependencies to patch any known vulnerabilities. This can be done using apt get update. So, while you're writing a Docker file, so even you're using base image, so it's good to update your base images with the dependencies like apt get update, because once you've done that apt get update, so apt is a package manager for Ubuntu, so it is going to talk to your official registry of Ubuntu, and it go and pull all the latest versions of dependencies that are using in your image, because the old versions of packages or dependencies might have some vulnerabilities. So it's good to use the latest versions of your dependencies. So that's why updating your images regularly is the best practices, right, while you're writing Docker file. And use the specific versions, because specific extract versions of all packages and dependencies in your Docker file is to avoid the unintentional pulling in vulnerable versions during builds. That's true, because since you are a developer or DevOps engineer, you know what all versions you need to use and what all versions you need to use to build your application and in runtime. And that situation, you need to be very cautious while you're building your application, because you need to specifically mention which version you want to use while building. And you already know that, like, what all versions are vulnerable and what all versions are not vulnerable, and safe to use in production or any other environment. So that's why it's better to stick with the specific versions while you adding the packages and dependencies in your Docker file. And the next one, scanning for vulnerabilities. So being a best practices, you need to utilize the content vulnerability scanning tools such as Trivi, Clear, Anchor, and identify the remedies. So we have other email scanners to find the vulnerabilities in a real world. So it's good to scan your images after creation, um, once you write a Docker file. So it's good to scan your image to find the vulnerabilities, or good to scan your Docker file to find the vulnerabilities. That's why it's a best practices to scan for vulnerabilities. And the next one is a more important, like avoid running as a root. So because, while writing a Docker file, so developer may forget to uh, run the entire operation as a non-root user. So that's a that's a very crucial to keep eye on writing a Docker file. So avoiding running as a root, because like whenever possible, uh, run your container with non-root user. So even a description saying that, hey, if you are using a root user, so attacker can take advantage of all your container if you get a vulnerable, or if you have taken access of your container. So it's not best practices to run your container with a root. So it should be best practices to run as a non-root user, and for potential security breaches. So if you created a user and if you're using a non-root user, so that user may have some limited access and permissions and restrictions. Even attacker have taken the advantage to do some operations, so he cannot do much as root user do. So that's the best reason to you know run your container with non-root user. So we will see how we can implement this thing on your in this video itself. So I'll demonstrate like a sample Docker file. And next, implement the least privileges, like limiting the capability of your container only when it's necessary for them to function properly. And this reduces the potential damages attacker can do if compromises your container, which means like limiting capabilities of your containers that only necessary from them function properly, which means like, hey, I would like to make it as a least privileges to run it as when it necessary, or when I need to follow the function, when I need to call the function, or when I need to run the container at the time when I would like to run it. So that's the reason you need to implement least privileges by following the best practices. And source configuration we have, and use Docker build kit and regular audits. So like ensure your application a container configured secure, and can include the appropriate file permissions. That's the more important, like you can add the file permissions while writing the Docker file, and what all files have what all permissions, so you can restrict it and accessing or say, following the security protocols. And you can use a build kit offer to improving the security features like build and isolation yourself of your Docker file. So this is and doing the regular audits, like perform regular security audits of your Docker files and container images to identify address the potential vulnerabilities and misconfigurations. So this best practices can be rely on over here, which is scanning for vulnerabilities and doing a regular audits while you're writing or while scanning or images or files. So this is all the best practices, guys, like you have to follow it while in your environment. So if you have followed these all best practices, you can stay away from security flaws, or you can stay away from the vulnerabilities in your environment. And well, I'm going to demonstrate, like how can you write a secure Docker file. So if you're not familiar with the Docker file, I suggest you to go and learn the basics of Docker file, what all components we used. So since it is DevSecOps playlist, so I would like to go with a minimal information. You know, in terms of basics, I didn't want to cover basics as much as regularly we do in coachings. So if you're following the secure Docker writing the Docker file best practices. So if you're saying that, hey, use official OpenJDK, since I'm using a Java application containerized, so I have taken as the OpenJDK for that, and I have using Adobe OpenJDK, which 11 version 11, and I'm using the base image which is official, and this is my image tags, which is 10.0.12_7. And as we discussed, like create a non-root user with limited privileges, because we have to create a non-root user, and we need to use this user to do any operations in our container. So that's why we have used run add group and system Java, and after that we have seen that, like, we're creating add user system ignore Java and no create home Java. So this is a basic operation that we have performed as a non-root user. And this command, like run component, can be used while your image is getting created. So I would like to perform some operations while his image is getting created out of my Docker file. That's why I have used a run. And set a working directory instead of the content, like it's the best practices to set a working directory wherever you want to perform all the operations. And copy the application jar file into container. So this is a basic operation regularly we do after copying the jar file. Or if you don't want to make your image is more weight, like 1 GB or 900 MB, you can use a multi-stage Docker file to get build and copy the artifact into a Tomcat any other web servers. So next one, changing the ownership of application directly into the non-root user. So this is the main important, guys, like, because we have created over here as a run and component. Again, we are changing the ownership of, like, user non-root user. So run ch ch1 of hyphen or Java, and after that we are performing some amount of operation, which means, like, changing over ownership of application in a directory. And that's the reason, like, I would like to perform it as a non-root user. I didn't want to perform it as a root user. And next, expose the port. This is the basic information. Switching the non-root user for improve the security. So you're being in this entire Docker image as a non-root user. So you are not converting as a root user. And finally, set the Java security manager for additional application security. So you can configure the CMDs, like, and we have an interpoint also. You can configure security managers for any other security of a application. You can pass it as a variables, and you can make your own customization security best practices. So this is a basic information or basic intro of writing your Docker file in secure manner. And this is a best practice, guys, because in a industry current industry, um, as per my research, so there are 108 out of 100, 80% of organizations are using their application as a container based deployment. So it is mandatory to learn the best practices of Docker and how we can write the Docker file and how you can scan your Docker image and stay away from vulnerabilities. So this is more important, even if you are a developer, if you are a DevOps, or if you are a cloud engineer. So Docker is, I mean, containerization is everywhere. So that's the mandatory, and that's the need for current time. Even Docker is used for machine learning, and Docker is used for artificial intelligence, because they're also writing the source code into their own language, such as Python, Ruby, and other languages which are dynamic, and they're converting their source code into image, which is Docker image. So if you want to convert your source code into a image, so you should have a Docker file as written into along with the source code, and you can run it for building your Docker image. So because Docker is everywhere, so you should have to learn the best practices to convert your source code into containerization. And since you have writing a Docker file, so from the Docker file you can convert a Docker file into Docker image, and you can share this image into a number of environments, or you can share this image into your open source community if you are contributing to open source community. So the other candidate, like whoever they are using yours image, so he doesn't need to install any softwares to get run your source code, because you can customize your Docker in image. You can bind all the requirements to get run the source code which is inside of Docker image, and you can share to a number of people. You can share to different environments, such as, and usually in a current world, we have a four environment, which is dev and stage, pi, and production. So dev is the developer environment, and stage is testing environment, and pi is a pre-production, and we have a next is a production. So you can share the same base image into four environment. You can test in each environment how your application is performing, and you can scan your image in four environment, and you can find the vulnerabilities, like how it is picking the vulnerabilities on each environment. So that's the reason, like, if you're a techie, if you're working on the writing the source code and implementing, or if you're a programmer, whatever designation you are, if you're dealing with a code, so it's best practices to run a Docker best practices and implement in your infrastructure. So that's all for this lecture, guys. So I hope it is clear for everybody about the writing the Docker and best practices. So we'll meet in next session. How we can scan, or how we can create a Docker file out of Docker image. Sorry, how we can create a Docker image out of Docker file, and how we can get it scanned, and how we can keep this Docker image in private and public image registries, and how we can pull it, and how we can create a containers. So those operations we'll discuss in next sessions in this DevSecOps series itself. So until then, thank you for watching, and stay safe, and please share this video and subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching. Bye bye.